Okay, we're ready to begin. Hi, my name is Yvette Williams, and I'm chair of the Clark County Black Caucus. And I'd like to introduce to you the host of this event today. We're here at Nehemiah Ministries, and I'd like to introduce you all, if you don't know him already, Pastor Kelsey West, and he's going to provide us with the welcome.
Good evening. As just announced, my name is Kelsey West. I'm honored and humbled to serve not only as the pastor of Nehemiah Ministries Christian Church, but also as a member of the NAACP, as well as other leading organizations in our community. It gives me great pleasure to say welcome. Welcome not only to our church home, but welcome to a place where we can listen and learn on this evening. May God bless you, and again, I say welcome.
Thank you. We would also like to acknowledge our sponsors for our series, our March Madness Candidate Forum series. I'd like to acknowledge, and if you could just wave so that people know who you are, we'd like to acknowledge Roxanne McCoy from the NAACP. Atar Hasbala, Executive Director for the ACLU Nevada. And Devin Moore from GoUrbanLasVegas.com. And of course ourselves, the Clark County Black Caucus. And now I'd like to introduce to you our moderator for tonight. He is a member of the ACLU Nevada, and we'll bring up to introduce to you Anthony Curry.
Good evening. So before we get started, I want to just thank everybody for being here, thank the candidates for being here, thank the panelists for being here. So to introduce our panelists, I'm going to start closest to me and go furthest away. We've got Devin Moore II from GoUrbanLasVegas.com. We've got Lisa Mosley from the Clark County Black Caucus. And Andrew Woods from the NAACP of Las Vegas. Please be advised that we will not allow any campaign signs in the audience. However, t-shirts are fine. Community will engage in a question and answer prior to the closing remarks. We ask that the candidates answer the panelists' questions within 3 minutes, unless the moderator gives different instructions. Not every question may be directed to every candidate. Each of you will be given 3 minutes for opening remarks to share whatever you choose with the audience. Additionally, you'll be given 2 minutes for closing remarks when the opportunity presents itself at the end of the program. And then just for the audience, although this event is open to the public, this is a private property and a place of worship. We ask everyone to maintain a respectful environment and that you do not speak over each other. The person with the mic has the floor. Any outbursts or disruptions, and you will be asked to leave. We want to keep this as a safe and respectful learning environment. On behalf of the sponsors, we thank you for your cooperation. Now to introduce the candidates, we have Mr. Kevin McMahill and Mrs. Stan Height. I'd also like to mention that Mr. Thomas Roberts could not be here. He's on a legislative trip to New Orleans. All right, and with that, we will begin with the panelist questions. So, we'll begin with the opening remarks. So, we'll start once again closest to me and then move out. So, Mr. McMahill, your opening statement.
You want to stay seated?
This is your choice.
Thank you. Thank you everybody for coming as well. Again, my name is Kevin McMahill, and I'm running to be your next Clark County Sheriff and the leader of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. It's a big job, 6,000 people, $1.3 billion budget, experience counts. I know many of you in the room, if not almost everybody. What I will tell you is that I spent the last 6 years as the #2, the top non-elected official at the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. 2 people who were radicalized up there that then came down to Las Vegas and assassinated 2 of my police officers sitting at CC's Pizza. Went right next door and killed a civilian before our officers took care of business. I led that in as well. You all know what happened in 1 October. 58 people died and 2 other people subsequently have lost their life. 422 other people were shot with an AR-15 round that day. 850 total were injured. I can tell you that without a doubt, the men and women of law enforcement and your first responders saved a lot of lives. Moving into COVID, 5 police officers have died. 1 civilian has died. It's a tremendous leadership challenge to go in and convince those men and women to go to work every single day while most of the rest of the city is shut down. Very difficult leadership challenge. I'm really proud of what it is that they did and how they did it. But very quickly moving into the summer of unrest last year, we made sure that we protected the constitutionally protected right of people to assemble and to protest. But when it evolved into rioting and arson, we took action. I believe that's what our community wants, but I have to tell you, not just anybody. There's nobody in the race that has that experience. But most importantly, the number one thing that we have as a problem in our communities today is that police departments don't listen. They don't pay attention to what it is that people say. They don't have deep, meaningful relationships within their communities. I've done that for years. I was the captain at Bolden Area Command. I led the Metropolitan Police Department in moving forward, developing those relationships, and I'm going to continue to do that as your sheriff. So thank you very much for having me.
Hello, everyone, and again, thank you for allowing us to present our campaigns to you. My name is Stan Height, and I'm running for sheriff of Clark County. I have got a Bachelor of Science degree in Criminal Justice Administration from San Diego State University, and I have 30 years experience with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department as an officer and as a sergeant. I'm married to my beautiful wife over here for 22 years. My daughter's right behind her. My wife is Danette, my daughter is Tiffany, and I also have a son. With that, I want you to know a little bit about my values. I am a Christian man, and I do believe that my faith in Christ is what's going to govern my decision-making, my ethics, my integrity. I also am a very patriotic individual. I love our military. I love our police. I believe in the country and Nevada, Clark County first. As well, I'm a conservative. I do have conservative values. I believe in closed borders. I do believe in our First Amendment rights. I believe in freedom of speech and basically freedom of choice. And what's gotten me off the couch and into this race is the Constitution. Basically, as our government has grown and our rights have shrunk, I've become afraid of our government as it is at the moment. I want to get in this race to protect our constitutional freedoms. I want to be able to represent the people of Clark County, not just the big business, not just the big casinos or big government, big pharma. I want to represent we the people, which is all of us, all of you. I want to make sure our rights are protected. I want to make sure the police are not used for unconstitutional vaccine and mask mandates. I want to make sure our police do not close our churches or close our businesses that they call non-essential, because I can't find a business that's considered non-essential to the people that own it. I want to make sure our gun rights are protected. I want to investigate sex trafficking. I want to make sure we take care of our homeless. I want to take care of the things that we, the people, are concerned with. And my leadership style is going to be hands-on and very participative. I'm not going to be sitting in an ivory tower doling out orders. I'm going to be in the briefings. I'm going to be in the patrol cars. I'm going to be on the field. I'm going to be hearing the concerns of the line officer that's actually out there doing the job. I'm going to be there so I can hear their concerns and make sure I can facilitate solutions to the problems that we have in our very diverse community, because we are a very diverse community and we need to be a very diverse police department, approachable and listening to the many concerns of our community. So I hope you consider my campaign, StanHeightForSheriff.com. Thank you again for having me here.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to ask that you remain seated for the questions and the closing remarks. I didn't take into account the cameras here set up, so they weren't able to see you on the screen. And with that, we're going to get started with the questions. I think our first question is coming from Mr. Moore.
Good evening. I want to thank everyone for being here today. Such an important race. I want to thank, of course, NAACP, the caucus, as well as the ACLU for putting together such an important event. My first question tonight, we want to begin with Mr. Height. Can you describe for us what you've done as a leader to establish and further improve relationships between the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department and the community?
Well, I'm approachable, and I welcome anybody that wants to be, addressed. As an officer, I love being in a restaurant on my lunch break and having people come up and ask me questions. I welcome participation of the community in all events. As an officer, I participated in many, many community events, a shop with a cop, the medal ceremonies with some of the athletes in our community. I just like to participate with the community and share my experience with them in all ways. And most of all, just being welcoming to anybody that wishes to approach me.
And then, Mr. McMahill, if you could go ahead and answer the question as well.
Read it one more time for me.
Yes, certainly. Can you describe for us what you have done as a leader? All right, let's try this again. Can you describe for us what you have done as a leader to establish and further improve relationships between the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department and the community? Were you able to hear me?
Well, let me start by saying I apologize for my manners. I should have also said thank you to both Reverend West. You can hear me? Thank you very much for opening your home here. Also to Roxanne from NAACP and Natar from the ACLU. I agree, this is a great forum for us. Listen, again, not only did I rise to the very top non-elected official in the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, but I did that along the way by making sure that I made a difference in our community. The number one issue between police and communities of color today is the use of deadly force. I am the one, along with then Assistant Sheriff Ted Moody, who designed the police officer involved shooting review process, where you have a criminal investigation and an administrative investigation. That administrative investigation focuses on policy, procedure, training, tactics, leadership, and supervision. And we went from a high of officer-involved shootings in 2010 of 25, many of those were unnecessary, to last year a number of 8. We put in real accountability and real transparency. There's 18,000 police departments in this country. Many of you saw me after every officer-involved shooting. For 5 years, I was the face of the Metropolitan Police Department in all those difficult times. I went out within 72 hours. I went out, I played every body-worn camera video that we had. I gave you details about what happened during those incidents, and we were as transparent as we could possibly be about all of those. I will tell you, as a leader during that organization, it wasn't an easy thing to do. But also, I introduced body-worn cameras to our officers. Today, back then when we were getting ready to introduce them, they thought I was the worst thing in the whole world for doing that. Today, they believe in them, they know them, they capture the information, and there's still all kinds of police departments in this country that don't follow the lead of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department and the best practices that are designed in there. Also, deep relationships, starting with becoming the captain of the Bolden Area Command and creating the Safe Village and working a Safe Village and going in and reducing crime in West Las Vegas in 1 year by over 40%.
I'm so tempted to stand up, but I understand you can't see me on camera. So my question is to first Mr. McMahill and then Mr. Haidt, to you. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna go way off script. That's okay. Mr. McMahill, you mentioned the 2 officers who were killed in CC's Pizza, and my heart goes out to their families, to the Metropolitan Police Department. That was a sad moment for all of us here in Las Vegas. That was a sad moment. Much more common, though, than officers being killed or officers pulling people of color, minority folks, communities of color, and lower income folks over for minor misdemeanor offenses. For example, Byron Williams, who was pulled over for not having a light on a bicycle. Much more common are those kinds of incidents where you have people of color, poor communities, people being pulled over and experiencing interactions with police for low-level offenses like not having up-to-date vehicle registration. for having a tail light that's broken out. Those interactions are much more common and often lead to violence. What would you do, each of you, as the head of Metropolitan Police Department? How would you have your officers handle those low-level offenses? And what would you do to support, what kinds of offenses would you support being decriminalized or legalized? Because those are the interactions that lead to violence, sometimes between community members and police. What would you do to reduce those interactions, and what would you do, what kind of offenses would you support being decriminalized or legalized?
That's a great question. Everything that she just said is correct. Those low-level offenses oftentimes lead to high levels of use of force by officers against those individuals that we're stopping. Some of those crimes have already been decriminalized, and civil fines have been added to those for that very reason. The police don't make the laws, and so I think that one of the important parts is to continue these types of conversations in our communities, because it really goes to the heart of procedural justice, doesn't it? Whether or not the police are trusted by the community, they feel like that they listen, because we get the power to police from the very people that it is that we police, right? If we have no trust and no legitimacy, then the people feel a particular way about it. A lot of studies actually show that crime has gone up. As we sit here today, the Clark County Detention Center remains the largest mental health facility in the state of Nevada, the largest addiction treatment center in the state of Nevada, and the largest homeless shelter in the state of Nevada. What I also will tell you is that incarceration does not fix any one of those issues. Incarceration doesn't fix mental health, doesn't fix addiction, and it doesn't fix homelessness. Yet, with the advent of 911, we are the ones that are found to be the only ones responsible to deal with these issues that we have. And so I support all of these conversations about removing some of those lower level offenses and not making them criminal. But again, I will make this point to you, that the sheriff who you elect does not make the law. This is conversations for all of us, because after all, we're in it together, right? The very basic fundamental force that I'm talking about when you look at what community policing is in our communities is that we start with the humanity. That you don't see me for a white cop and I see you for whatever it is that you are, or whoever it is that you sleep with, or whatever house that you worship in. The reality is that we have to recognize from the very get-go that we're all human beings. And when we come together to answer those kinds of questions that you've just asked, we have to be willing to listen to one another. We have to be willing to try and to challenge and change in law enforcement, because if we don't, we're going to look like so many of these other cities that have failed, and that's exactly why I came back to run for sheriff.
Sir, I appreciate your answer, but I don't think that we got an actual answer to the question. You want to have the conversation. How do you think that those low-level offenses should be enforced? And yes, the sheriff doesn't make the law, but what low-level offenses would you support becoming non-criminal?
Well, I thought I answered it, but I'll tell you, I'll give you just a simple question of addiction, right? So you have somebody that has a pocket full of whatever drug it is that you have. We all know that nobody's actually getting prosecuted for these things. And we also know that once you start to become criminally justice involved, oftentimes you stay criminally justice involved. So I'm very supportive of finding alternatives so that police don't have to put people into a jail for things that are criminal right now, that we could actually be spending time, effort, and energy on prevention and treatment for all of those types of cases. But I think maybe the question was maybe referring to minor traffic offenses. Many of those have already been decriminalized. I'll tell you what I won't. You have to have insurance on your vehicle, right? All of these types of things have to have conversation around them. And whatever specificity that you're looking for on those traffic charges, I don't support completely decriminalized traffic. I do not. But there are, let me give you one example. Something hanging from your rearview mirror. Why are we doing car stops for that? Your tail light. Your tail light is out. It should be a notification that, hey, your tail light is out. So if you wanted me to get a little bit more specific from that perspective, I was, but I was taking it a little broader because I do believe that the entirety of the criminal justice system has to be involved in answering these kinds of questions.
Thank you. Mr. Height?
Yes.
Same question.
Okay. I was basically an officer and sergeant with Metro for 30 years. I handled patrol most of my career. During that time, we made a lot of car stops for a lot of minor infractions. I think they're important. I think they're important for many reasons. Traffic is a leading cause of personal injury, death, and property damage. They need the laws that are on the books are not like Kevin said. They're not put there by the sheriff. They're put there by legislators, and we're tasked with the enforcement of those laws. Now, how we handle those car stops is very important. Treating people with respect is the number one thing that we need to impress upon our officers. Just treating people with respect. But I think a lot of the problems and confrontations we have are because people resist the officers' attempts at their enforcement or their at least investigation of these minor what you call them, infractions. So, but I consider them important as Kevin does. They do prevent death. They do prevent property damage. It's mainly how we relate to the community. We need to show respect. We need to have training. We need to properly select the officers from the community that are and train them in diverse cultures, because there are different ways that people respond to being pulled over. I've worked in all different communities. I've worked in the black communities. I've worked in the white communities. I've worked in the Asian communities. And it's just a matter of respecting and showing and communicating with the public. If we communicate, the public can have a better understanding of just why we're pulling them over. And I think the training, the communication, and just how we treat our community should have a major effect on that. Did that answer your question?
I don't think that we. So I don't think that we got a specific answer on that either. So I'll take it in two parts. How do you specifically think that the low-level offenses should be enforced? From your answer, are you saying that the way that it's currently being enforced is the way that it should be enforced?
I do believe that there's nothing wrong with the way we're enforcing it, as long as we're treating people with respect. I don't believe the police are the ones totally at blame all the time. Of course, we make mistakes. Of course, we have some officers that have poor communication skills and poor training. That needs to be improved. But I think some of the blame has to be the public that resists or fights or lies or tries to get out of certain things. I mean, when you're looking at possibly going to jail, and you don't go to jail for small infractions, so we're not looking at taking people to jail for a broken taillight.
Oh, yes, they do.
Okay, actually we don't, but we do if they get out of the car and maybe take a punch at the officer, then they go to jail. But it's not for the broken taillight. The broken taillight is a citation, and that's it. Now, if the people get a citation and then don't respond to that citation, a judge comes out with a warrant, and then that judge orders us to make an arrest on that warrant. That's not up to the sheriff or the officers as well.
Okay, and then I'll ask you the second part, just to get a specific answer on that. Are there any low-level misdemeanors that you would support becoming non-offenses if they were enacted by the legislator?
Things like, no, I believe that the low-level offenses are there for a reason. I mean, we need, like Kevin said, we need insurance. I mean, if somebody hits my daughter in her vehicle and causes her injury and has no insurance, that's a major deal. So I think even a simple thing like insurance is very important. Taillights are safety issues. We need them. So I believe that we need to have the authority to be able to pull people over. And, I give warnings all the time. I don't necessarily like to task the public with fines. I mean, I wrote, as a police officer, I wrote 1 or 2 tickets a month. And they were justified citations. I don't hold back on what I choose to write a citation for.
Thank you.
Good evening. Police departments across the country are struggling to recruit new applicants, especially Black candidates as police officers. Looking at the most recent graduating class, there was only 1 Black officer. Can you tell us why you think this is occurring, and what will you do as sheriff to improve the recruitment of Black officers? Or indicate if you don't feel there's a problem at all. Candidate Height first.
We need to make Metro welcoming to all diverse cultures, Black communities, Asian communities, Native American. We need to make the department welcoming. And how do we do that? We reach out to those communities. We go specifically, we like college graduates, we like veterans, we like people that are responsible. So maybe we could go out and we research those type of candidates within the community. Of course, if we don't make it welcoming, then we're not going to get responses at all. Right now, our ranks are depleted. We need more of all nationalities and cultures in our department. But to reach out specifically to one particular culture, we need to go to that area and present ourselves and offer incentives, let them know the career and maybe give them a hands up as far as preparation, training, coaching, and just whatever education they might need, present them avenues so that they can be a viable candidate for the position.
Candidate McMahill.
Thank you. That's another really great question in the sense that the last numbers that I recently saw was Metro was down about 275 officers for current budgeted positions. We have to acknowledge that recruiting has been difficult all across this country for policing. Much of that is narrative we've brought on ourselves, but also a lot of that is sort of the unrest that we've seen after the murder of George Floyd. So to answer your question and specifically on what to do about recruitment, I think you also have to go in and talk to the people at Metro that are there that come from communities of color. One of the things, and I did that as your undersheriff, we have a Multicultural Affairs Council that currently is working specifically on African-American recruitment. We have African-American recruitment groups. We have that for pretty much AAPI and Latinos, LGBTQ, pretty much everybody that you possibly can. It still remains, though, when you go in and you look at what's going on at Metro, the truth is that when you see that our numbers closely reflect about 10-11% in the African-American range, we're fairly close. On the Hispanics, we're the population somewhere between 35 and 38%, according to what I've been told recently. The school district is 51%. We're sort of becoming a majority Hispanic community. We're not doing as well there either as we need to be. And so I think part of that challenge that we have is we have to go back and look, because if you keep doing what you've always done, you're always going to get what you always got, right? We all know the answer to that question. So I think part of it is we haven't done a very good job of explaining the job. What's really interesting when you talk to black officers is we have far more black officers that work inside of the Clark County Detention Center than we do out on the street. And so you ask them why, and their words are that it's more culturally acceptable in their families for them to work in the jail and not be the one that's out there on the streets making the arrests and the stops, which goes to your earlier question, right? Because it's really the perception about the police and what those minor stops look like. Does that outweigh the harm that is sometimes caused? And so those are all things that we have to continue to look at and to find ways to make them understand to be part of the solution by joining up. That piece and part of that also entails that we do a better job of explaining why you're not going to become a millionaire as a police officer, but you have a pretty good retirement. You have pretty good benefits. There's great opportunity within our organization, and we have to do better on explaining that to people.
I was hoping I could get the question that you asked, so forgive me for going off script just for half a second. I sat with Metropolitan Police Department for an entire year discussing this very subject. Mr. Mujahid Ramadan brought a group of people in. I believe Roxanne might have been there for a while. It was a great group of people. We sat there for an entire year having dialogue and conversations. I believe maybe once or twice a month. And after an entire year, we walked away with nothing accomplished. We asked them, hey, what budget do you have that you're targeting, specifically the Black community, to improve the relations? Conversation stopped. And so what it told us was that there's not a lot of interest in when it comes to actually putting meat on the bones. It was nothing but a bunch of hot air. And so the question I have is, what will be your willingness to really put much more force behind the recruitment process and engaging the current officers, because they do have a lot of relationships in our community. Most of us will know Adrian Hunt, very active in our community, but when it comes to him being able to have influence in the process to say this is why it's not working, he's not engaged. So what would you specifically do to utilize those officers and build their reputation up back in the community, particularly the Black community? Either one can go.
So can I ask you when that occurred? Was that within this last year?
No, pandemic. So it was definitely pre-pandemic. So let's just say within the last 3 years, possibly.
Well,
3 to 4 years.
the reason I asked that is obviously as the undersheriff, I was there for 6 years, and almost every single one of those kinds of meetings I was invited to. I'm surprised to hear that you had that meeting at Metro and I wasn't involved. And
At the headquarters for a whole year.
yeah, well, that's not right. And one of the things that I always talk about with police is that, when you're the sheriff, you don't make a lot of money as the sheriff, but you have a lot of power. Never had a single person that I asked to come to the table to come to work to solve a problem that ever told me no. Just like I'm sure you got the ask and you showed up and then you did the work. And you go to work and you put all that time and effort and energy into doing something, and then nothing. You have every right to be upset and to question us. But I wasn't involved in that, but I can tell you this. I guarantee you that we can dust all of that off that you did, and we can find a way to do that, because if you all spent a year, there's got to be a tremendous amount of stuff that you came up with that we can try. And as your sheriff, I'll try it. I'll also put the dollars behind it. We are going to fail if we don't increase the diversity of our organization. But let me be very clear about this as well. We still today, right? You have to walk the walk. We still today have never had a female above the rank of deputy chief at Metro. That will be changed on day one, right? If the highest ranking African American that we have at Metro is now a captain. The structure of the way that is built is that the sheriff can only promote people to deputy chief, assistant sheriff, or undersheriff from the rank of captain. So right now we have one African American candidate that could potentially move up in the organization. It hasn't always been like that. We had Charles Hank and Tim Kelly that worked directly with me as assistant sheriffs, both great men. They both decided to retire at a very quick period of time. But the question has to be asked and continue to be asked, why is it that we have people of color that are not choosing to rise up through the ranks? And I think some of that is how it is that they feel about organizations, about people in the organization. How do they feel supported? Personally, I mentored hundreds of officers every year to take different tests. And we have to continue to do that. We can't rely only on the fact that some people think that if the color of your skin matches the person we're trying to recruit, that is always going to result in success. It's a good thing oftentimes, but you know as well as I do that no matter what you do, when you go to mentor somebody, if you don't have a connection through that mentorship process, you never get to where it is that you need to do. But the answer specifically to your question is, our organization doesn't look like it needs to in the command structure of our organization, and it will.
Thank you. Same question, sir.
First off, I don't believe that we should be given handouts. We need to be given hand up. So we gotta, like I said, like Kevin just brought up, we gotta mentor those that need to be promoted. Those that are showing quality, those that are showing leadership skills, we take those people and we train them, and we make the job welcoming to them. And if they don't accept it, I don't believe in just forcing identity politics into our department. The department won't be a quality department if we just start, I have to promote 4 females, I have to promote 2 blacks, I have to promote 3 Latinos. I just believe we need to make it welcoming to everyone, and hopefully we can mentor in the communities where we're lacking. Mentor, make it something they really want to do. And if they want to do it, we will have success. We'll definitely have success promoting all. First off, we have to start with the beginning. Our ranks are so depleted that we are way understaffed. So we need to get people in the ranks first, and then provide them with the mentoring, the welcoming, and the improvement that we need to get them up the ranks.
Gentlemen, we know that Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, Mr. McMahill, you mentioned it, has gone through a transformation. We recognize that there was a problem with the culture, particularly around racism, police violence. Metro made the efforts and did a wonderful job of going through and revamping, transforming that department so that they now have become a model to other departments around the country. But there's still issues. And I'm speaking to you as someone who's been on the other side of the badge. I would like to know, first of all, let me say this. I think many of the changes in the department have to come at the academy level. You can't have recruits come through, learn that culture in the academy, and take that culture out on the street, and then try to change that once they're out there. It has to be nipped in the bud during the academy. I also think that, and you also mentioned this, Mr. McMahill, that officers are the first responders, 911 calls, mental health, but I also don't think our officers are equipped to do that. Again, I think that has to happen at the academy level. So my question to you both is, what will you do as the head of the Metropolitan Police Department to, one, change the culture in the academy and provide the necessary tools and training to the officers that they need at the academy level? I also am a fan of implicit association tests. I think that should be administered in the academy. That will weed out a lot of the racism before those officers get through the academy and out on the street, because we know once they get in the department and off probation, it's impossible, and I speak as someone who's tried it, it's impossible to get rid of toxic officers. So what will either of you do to transform the academy, the teachings of the academy, and what will you do to get rid of toxic officers while they're in the academy?
I think it starts even before the academy. I think it starts with a selection process.
Absolutely.
We need to have a good weeding process to get the right candidates, the open-minded candidates, the ones that are willing to be a sponge, to learn, not just come in already with preconceived biases and things. Then the academy, the training, and the things you mentioned are very well important. But then also the field training level, because once they come out of the academy, a lot of the times these recruits are told, okay, forget everything you learned in the academy now, it's here I am, I'm going to be training you. So it's all three levels: selection, academy, and field training. And each of these, we need proper supervision, proper training, proper selection. And we can, through maturity, we're going to gain the successes that we need.
So what will you do as chief to make that happen?
Well, first off, it's going to be leadership from the top down. Basically, have the right mental outlook yourself as the leader, and that will flow down the ranks to the officers themselves. So just basically being an officer who partners with the community in all things. I mean, a sheriff that partners with everyone in the community will give a mentality down the ranks to where it will be emulated. And that's basically what I can do as sheriff, besides the training and the supervision that's also required.
I was hoping to hear that you're going to be getting rid of some of those officers and training officers and things like that. As a sheriff, you have the power as a sheriff to come in and transform that department and get rid of folks who don't want to be there, get rid of folks who are causing problems. I guess I probably should just ask that question. But I was trying to give you all the room to talk about what you would do at all of these levels.
Before I want to get rid of anybody, because I believe we can develop, I believe we can mature, I believe we can grow, and I believe in second chances when people screw up. So if they need to be gotten rid of, we'll get rid of them. But first and foremost, I want to work with them. I want to work with them and develop them. I think people can learn. And like I said, it starts from the top up, top down. So having the right sheriff and having the right values, I think will go down. Now, we have an officer that just can't be corrected, then yeah, we either remove them from the position where they come in contact with the community, or we remove them from the department completely. Okay.
So that's a great question that I have to tell you, I disagree with you just a little bit, and I'll tell you why. I don't think that when you go in and you look at our academy curriculum, I think the academy is 23 weeks long now or something along those lines, and 18 weeks in field training. We've opened up our academic curriculum to, you can see it if you want. I would love for you to come in, and we have implicit bias training. We have anything that has been out there in the world today as far as this is what police departments need. It's in the academy setting. What I found, though, while you're sitting in the academy, you're a very captive audience. So you're studying, you're doing all the things you're supposed to do, you're giving all the right answers, you're checking all the boxes and all of those things. But where we go wrong is we get into that field training environment. And I did that job for a long time, but we have exceptional field training officers. But what Stan said is true, and it happened to me as a police officer, was everything that you learned in the academy was all garbage. I'm going to teach you how to be a cop now, so let's get out here and do that. We all heard it at one point or another. So I think that we haven't really gone under a real review of that field training program and to see how it is, because we have discovered after these guys get out of the academy and they're willing to give that kind of feedback after they're away from their field training officer, that we've discovered a number of things that were not good, and we fixed those. But I think an overall overhaul of that entire system, we do things like with Mujib Ramadan, where we have our officers go out after a couple of days afterwards into places in the community. Adopt a cop is what we call that. And so there's a lot of things that we are doing, and I'm open to all of those new ideas. But the other part I would tell you is I agree with Stan, and I will tell you as the undersheriff, there wasn't really ever a week that went by that somebody didn't call me from the community and say so-and-so got disqualified from testing for Metro. And I was always assured that, there was never it happening over credit or never it happening over a speeding ticket. And about half the time I found out that we still had bias in that process. And so I implemented some review at a commander level to make sure that all of those things are being reviewed. But I am going to, at the very beginning of my tenure as your sheriff, I'm going to order a comprehensive review of the entire recruitment, the attraction, the hiring, the background process, and then how it is that we can move forward. Because I still believe that no matter what anybody says, there's a lot of qualified candidates that are being disqualified from being a police officer. And, the critics within the police department always say, well, you're just hiring the wrong kind of people. Today we have marijuana that is legal in our community. The people voted for it. Our standards for marijuana are always based on recency and frequency. Those questions need to be addressed. And what disqualifies somebody?
Quick follow-up, actually a comment regarding the recruitment in African Americans and other people of color being disqualified. Many times by the time those officers or those candidates get to the background process, they've had some interaction with the criminal justice system that already prevents them from moving forward. Yeah. And I'm talking about many times it's those low-level misdemeanors that we mentioned earlier. And so there needs to be some reform around that. That's why we're working toward the decriminalization and the legalization, so that we can remove those barriers that prevent Black and Latino, Asian, and lower-income folks and people from becoming officers. We want to become officers. But again, by the time they get to that background, whether it's credit or some criminal justice interaction they've had, that prevents them from moving forward. So I just wanted to put that out there so that's on your radar.
Yeah, so in the background review process at Metro, you can be disqualified for a period of 1 year, a period of 3 years, or permanently disqualified. I'll be honest with you, even as I sit here today, I'm not sure what the difference is applied between a 1 year disqualification and a 3 year disqualification. I know what gets you permanently disqualified, the use of a certain number of narcotics and those kinds of things, or arrests of a felony nature, all of those kinds of things. I think we really have, and what I think we also need to do when we're talking about the diversity of this, I think we need to go back and revisit a lot of those people that were disqualified And let's just see if there's a new approach to how it is that they're good people. They made some mistake. Just because you got pulled over by the police, last month and you got a traffic citation doesn't mean that you're not a good human being. And so those are the kinds of things that we're going to have to apply a different level of understanding to when we go forward in hiring people.
Mr. Hyde, you want to take a minute to answer?
Just wanted to reiterate exactly what Kevin just said. Basically, I believe in second chances. People make mistakes younger in their lives, and they grow up, and sometimes those mistakes make them even better and cleaner than the next guy going forward. And that's the kind of candidate I like. I like the candidate that is motivated, responsible. Just because they made mistakes doesn't mean they're permanently disqualified. And we need to look at these people. We need to stop disqualifying people for minor mistakes, or for even mistakes that might be even a little bigger, but they've been in the past, and they've demonstrated quality maturity going forward.
Thank you. We have about 10 minutes left in the panelist question portion before we get to the audience Q&A. So for these next set of questions, we're going to drop the answer time from 3 minutes to 2 minutes so we can try to get a couple more questions in, okay?
Mr. McMahill, my question is, the Las Vegas Valley is one of the most heavily surveilled areas in the country. It's certainly mass surveillance in the capital of Nevada. Do you think surveillance technologies are an effective way to fight crime? And how do you think that should be weighed against the rights of our communities?
Thanks. It's very interesting as you talk about what this looks like when it comes to technology. And one of my platforms is I want to make Metro one of the most technologically advanced police departments in this country. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Specifically to your question, we do have a real-time crime center at Metro. If you haven't seen it, please come check it out. We do have civilians and officers that are there and monitoring those cameras. And they do help provide a lot of ability for us to detect crimes, particularly in the downtown and strip locations where, because of the congestion, the vehicles, the traffic, that we would have normally never been able to go in and disrupt some of the criminal activity that we see there. Everybody knows as you're driving down the street, there's those cameras that are up on every light as you go by. It's a misnomer that we have access to those cameras or that those cameras record. Me personally, I would like those cameras to at least record for a 12-hour period so that when we have traffic accidents that result in fatalities, that you have crimes that are occurring, we could use that technology to really trace those individual subjects. But I do believe it would have to be specifically tied to a crime. One quick example. Today we have gunshot detection technology called ShotSpotter. It's acoustic microphones deployed in areas within our community. A gunshot goes off, we can triangulate to where that individual is. We're trying to get that when that same gunshot goes off, we can get a drone overhead within 30 seconds. Here's why. We'll be able to, for the first time in both of our careers, we'll actually have real-time intelligence about what is happening at the scene of a shooting. Because what we always did, what Stan and I always did, was you get a phone or a call that says 911, shooting occurring over here. We all jumped in our police cars and went as fast as we could to get there to try to stop it. And oftentimes, you come around the corner, you'd be right in the middle of an officer-involved shooting. So it can help.
You've run up on the time, but I wanted to ask the follow-up. So it sounds like you think that technology is an effective way to fight crime. How do you weigh that against the rights of people in the community? And if you could, just 1 minute on that one, please.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we engage in these discussions, and I haven't done it with the current head of the ACLU specifically on this privacy concern, but we had in the past previously, and we're also bound by 28 CFR, which is the Code of Federal Regulations about how long we can store data, right? We also had this conversation around license plate readers in the past and the deployment of license plate readers. I do support the use of technology, but I also support the use of technology responsibly.
Thank you. Mr. Wright, same question?
Yes, very simply, I support the use of technology in public locations, just not for profiling, but mainly for crime apprehension, detection, investigation. I don't think there's anything more I need to say about it. I do support it.
And how do you weigh that against the rights of members of the community?
We use it for just what I said, investigation, crime investigation, detection investigation, and and not for profiling, not for social agendas, not for basically, community detection of agendas and profiling, but rather than just strictly for crime. I can't think of anything else to distinguish the difference between the two.
Okay, thank you.
Protecting the community from violent crime has always been a priority for the Las Vegas Metro Police Department. As the homeland security threat evolves across the globe, can you tell us what you have done in the past and what will you do in the future to protect our community from an act of terrorism? Candidate McMahill first.
So many of you don't know, but while I was at Metro, I had the opportunity to attend an organization called LINKED, which is Leadership in Counterterrorism. I was also the lieutenant in counterterrorism, the captain, and all the way up through the ranks, I oversaw all of our terrorism investigations. And it is very true that Las Vegas is a target, and you're right, that homeland threat continues to evolve as we sit here today. That LINKED group that I'm talking about, I was elected president of that group, and it's the Five Eyes countries of Canada, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, and the whole of UK. So England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. We come together twice a year to study acts of terrorism, to understand them, to make sure that responses that different people in different communities know how to go in and do something about that. In fact, we have a conference in May in London, and then a year from May, that conference will be brought here, the top 500 counterterrorism professionals. When I tell you that, also, I think what's really important to understand is we've had this focus on homegrown violent extremism in the last probably decade or so. With the way that we left Afghanistan and Iraq, the truth is that those very same people that have wanted to kill Americans in mass attacks still want to kill Americans in mass attacks. And we are a very attractive target for those individuals that have that hatred in their heart. And so one of the other things I'm going to do is, aside from the already outstanding fusion center that we have, I'm looking at using some of the New York model to send my officers overseas to work with some of those other agencies that are better at counterterrorism than we are here in America. Israel is one example, the Northern Irish is another.
Thank you.
As we spoke earlier about the low-level crimes that take place as far as taillights out and stuff like that, that's a major information center for us. When we stop people like that, we learn things. That's actually a positive tool that police can use, not for profiling, not for putting people in jail for minor offenses, but for gathering information. And that's just one of the things that we do as first-line responders and police officers and first-line supervisors, sergeants, information, and then, of course, communications open with other agencies, the FBI, CIA, Israel, all the other different countries that can give us information on potential threats, and that's how we prevent by being proactive.
Thank you. So we have one question left from the panelists, and then we're going to go to our audience Q&A. In preparation for the audience Q&A, we're going to ask you to line up on this side of the room, to my left, your right. If you want to form a line there, we will have a microphone there for those audience questions once you're prepared. And then to our last panelist question.
Gentlemen, the last question I have is regarding mental health and how Metropolitan Police Department handles mental health crisis. I understand we all remember the incident with Tasha Brown, who died in police custody as a result of a chokehold. We understand that his mother said that he was told to go to the police department because they had crisis intervention centers. My question is, what is Metro doing to handle those kinds of crises now? And do you still have the crisis intervention centers? And how are we going to prevent Tasha Browns from happening in the future?
Their agitation. We need, if it takes more than one officer, if it takes even calling out a physician or a specially trained individual to deal with that type of person, then that's what it takes.
So, CIT training, to your point, was implemented into the police academy. So every officer that graduates from the academy, they do some classroom portion in the academy, and then the 2 weeks following graduation from there, they finish up that CIT training. So they all have the basic level of CIT training. We've also moved forward where they're getting some retraining. So because this mental health response continues to evolve as we move forward. I think what you would also be surprised to know probably is that Metro already has a joint responder effort in the downtown area where we suffer from most of the homelessness and mental health challenges in and around some of the neighborhoods there, but also on the Strip. And that involves a licensed clinical social worker responding with a police officer. Sometimes there's a firefighter, paramedic there as well. What's interesting to me in watching that particular issue evolve over the country is a lot of different agencies have tried various different models, and many of them went right back and just turned their back on it. And so there's none of that type of outreach. There are others that continue to move forward with that model to try to find what works. And I think it's important because not only do we have most teams that work with those folks, not only do we have CIT officers that actually, when we respond to a person with mental health, they fill out a document. And so when we find these people that are decompensating over a period of time, that when they've had 2, 3, and 4 opportunities to have relation with the police in mostly a negative fashion, the answer is not that we go do a legal 2000. We have had legal 2000s where, because the hospital is not equipped as emergency room doctors to evaluate the mental health of an individual as well. So what I'm advocating for as the sheriff is we need to find how it is that we can treat these individuals, because they're living with a very lifelong, oftentimes, challenge that we've not adequately addressed. And so I'm 100% open to studying best practices all across the country and continuing to try and find other alternatives than having the police have to have the responsibility for that response.
Thank you. So now we're open to audience Q&A. So I don't see anybody lined up. Do we have any audience questions? So for the audience questions, please try to get directly to your question. And we're going to give the candidates 2 minutes each to respond.
Oh, right.
Yeah, just so you know, we are streaming live.
All right, well, good evening. Thank you for your time and sharing this. My name is Will Rucker, and I am a huge supporter of our police department. I want to start with that. My question is specifically for you, candidate Height. If you could elaborate on your statement about handouts, and I'm just curious about what you meant about not having a quality department if we immediately corrected the lack of diversity.
Say that last part again.
You mentioned that we wouldn't have a quality department if we immediately diversified. And so I'm just hoping that you could expand on what you meant by that. And then secondarily, I'm just wondering if you would be supportive of diversifying the budget to support additional social workers, chaplains, and other peacekeepers in the community.
Okay, what I was trying to say about the quality is, I don't believe in just a handout to get, we need 13 black officers, just pick 13 black officers and just pick them because we need 13 black officers. I believe in a hand up, trying to train, trying to mentor, trying to improve their desire, their welcoming into the department. So that's the quality part that I was talking about. I don't want the department would suffer in quality if we just pick people based on color, based on sex, based on religion, or whatever it would be. We can't just identity politic the ranks into the numbers. We need to try to work with training and selection and just supervision, trying to make sure that we get the quality up to standard and include everybody in the community in that respect. And was there another part to that I missed?
Would you support diversifying?
Oh, yes, I would, yes. Using the budget as far as diversifying the community, yes. I have no problem with that. We need to diversify the community and the police department through the community, and yes, if it
whatever it takes, money, time, training, yes, anything it takes.
I think that his question with the diversity of the budget was to support social workers and like non-police officers to be out in the field to address problems.
And we need that. We need advocates. We need non-police officers. We need chaplains. Yes. So yes, to answer that question.
Thank you.
My name is Tiffany Height Davis. I'm Stan's daughter. But piggybacking off of a question that you were asking about the mental health, this is something I brought to my dad's attention, and I want to hear Kevin's answer as well. Working with my church, I've gone into the tunnels, the homeless community, and I've been working with a lot of these women that have been affected by sex trafficking. And there's a mental illness with it. You know, these women have been psychologically terrorized. So I want to know how the police department, if you are sheriff, how you intend to work with people that you stop on criminal stops, prostitution, right? A lot of these women are mentally terrorized. So I kind of wanted to go that route with the mental terrorized thing. How are you willing to work with these people that are coming in, being arrested? Prostitution is a big one, and they've been in these sex trafficking rings from children up, you know what I mean? And they get stuck in it and caught in the system.
Thank you.
Basically, we need to identify the difference between a victim and a suspect in prostitution. Basically, that's one of the most difficult parts of it, because these kids get indoctrinated. They first get victimized. They're kidnapped. They come from abusive relationships, and they run away from home. And these parents don't even report it. And within 2-3 days, they're either human trafficked or sex trafficked, and then they are manipulated by the handlers, and from there they just become addicted to whatever they're doing, or the Copenhagen belief that this is their friend instead of somebody that's just used and abused and manipulated them. So when we come in contact with that, we need officers trained to know the difference between a victim and a actual prostitute that is in it on their own. So when that happens, we can use advocates, we can use the training that the officers had, and we can use various agencies within the community to assist us, because we don't need to just be locking up these people. They need to be separated from the actual person that's just strictly a prostitute. You know, we don't need to be locking up somebody that's been sex trafficked and that has learned to conform to this situation. In a nutshell, that's basically.
To ask a follow-up on that really quickly, what does that training look like? How do you train somebody to identify that difference?
There's a lot of variables that I don't know them all. I have a list of them, but they're factors that let you know the probability of somebody having been trafficked as opposed to somebody that's just in it for the profit, and we can train on those specifics.
Okay.
Thanks. I think this is another one of those areas where we have to change culture. And when I say change culture, for the 33 years you were at Metro, I think, 30. And I was at 30, and I got to tell you that we always looked at the victims of sex trafficking as suspects. And the world has to move away from the idea of these women, mostly, but it's not all women, being viewed as suspects rather than truly the victims that they are. That's part of the reason why I'm not the sheriff yet, but I have already began meeting with a number of the United States human trafficking folks as well, because, by the way, when we do get into office, we're going to have the Super Bowl here, right? 2024, if I remember correctly. Around the Super Bowl, there's always a tremendous increase in human trafficking. And so we've got to be ready for what that looks like, because it's not just a one-day event. By the way, this is a multi-day event. And so that's also part of the reason why we started working with a number of the folks in the juvenile justice system to make beds available for these young women as they come in, and instead of being put into a cell in the juvenile detention center, actually taken to a place of treatment where we can wrap them in services to give them that mental health treatment, that addiction treatment, a number of things. And if family reunification is not necessarily possible because, like your dad said, sometimes those parents are shipping them off anyway. Then we've got to find alternatives so that those people can regain some dignity and respect in their own minds, and they can be raised to become good human beings who love themselves and contribute to our society.
Hi, my name is Felicia Hayes. I have two questions. One question is, well, I'll tell you a story. My friend and I, we were at College Station to get a job. The steward came in, a human resource, and he says there's only two ladies in there. He goes back to the manager and says there's only two ladies in the human resource. He said, I said, who's ever in there, hire them. So I got hired. So when you say you wouldn't hire just 13 black people, why not? They're going to need training anyway. So why wouldn't you hire those 13 people? If they're qualified to get as far as they are, why wouldn't you train them to go further?
If they're qualified, I would hire them, okay?
Hold on,
I'm sorry. Well, I wanted to answer that one directly.
My second question is, I'm a middle school teacher, and so when the pandemic hit, I had to make my office from home. So I'm looking out my window, if I'm looking out my window, police pass by, I can count at least five times for that whole school year. So my street was not patrolled properly to my satisfaction. Thank you.
We are understand. Okay, the first question. Basically, I just would not hire somebody just to hire somebody. They have to be qualified They've got to be able to read and write and speak English. I mean, if we're going to hire them as a police officer, they need to be able to communicate with people. So what I was saying was, I'm not going to just hire people just to get the numbers. I'm not going to pick somebody that has no education, no quality of communication, just because of a certain color. So
they're already there. They're already there. I mean,
if they're qualified, if they can, if they can fit the qualifications, they need to be 21, whatever the qualifications are. If they can fit that, absolutely, we'll take it. And even if they're weak in their qualities, we can work with that. We can train. That's what I believe in, giving a hand up, just not a hand out, just because of they're there. And so, yes, I believe in it. And then as far as your neighborhoods, we are short-staffed. I can't make any other excuse. We are short-staffed. Officers are supposed to be patrolling neighborhoods. That's a preventative aspect of our job. They can't always do it because they're going call to call to call to call. I look out, in my neighborhood, I don't see officers pass in front of my house, and they may pass in front and I may not see them. Doesn't mean they don't do it, but just the fact that you don't see it, it's one of two things. Either they're there when you don't happen to see it, or two, just they're so busy that they can't make it. Do you want to address any more?
What was your question specifically about officers at the school or in your neighborhood? Yeah, so this whole idea of neighborhood policing is something that we have to continue to really push to our officers, because it's troubling to me that you say, I don't ever see any officers. That means you don't know a lot of the officers that are assigned to your neighborhood. And so active community involvement by folks that live in neighborhoods and come to the events that police establish is one way of doing that. But the other way is for police to get out into your church, your neighborhood, your HOA, your whatever. When you feel a connection to the area command in which you live, to the area commander, then you have an ability to have that relationship. The reason the relationship is so important is that once we have a little bit of relationship, we build a little bit of trust. Once we build a little bit of relationship and a little bit of trust, we start to break things back down to the very simple effort that we're all human beings, first and foremost.
Thank you.
How you guys doing today?
Hello, sir.
My name is Kendall Smith. I'm from Fifth Element Hip Hop, represent the hip hop community. As you guys know, there's never been a sheriff that's been in support of the hip hop community. So when our events start to go off, they're often prematurely shut down, and that affects small business owners and entrepreneurs. People who want to see this culture thrive. It's usually shut down because of the stereotypes that's attached to hip hop. You know, and there are people that actually want to do good business with this. I want to know what you guys plan on doing to stop this from happening, because I feel like it's an attack on culture. It's the biggest genre of music in the world, and we live in a city full of entertainers, and these entertainers actually live out here in Vegas, and we want to know, how can you guys start to change the narrative of that?
So I'm actually very well aware of what it is that you're talking about. And we also can't ignore the fact that in some of those places we've had significant acts of violence. So let's do this. Again, we have to have relationship, because I don't want to close your hip hop event down, but I also don't want anybody to get hurt. Same thing at a country concert, right? We saw 58 people die at a country concert. So we have to start off with having a relationship, particularly, again, wherever you're going to be with that area command, so that we know that events are happening. We always, almost, this is how it usually goes. Sometimes it's put out on social media. The cops get told, hey, there's going to be this over there or that over there. They get there, you have unauthorized activity occurring, and so then they find a reason to say, okay, we're going to shut this down. Or the owner of the property finds a reason to say, hey, I want this thing shut down. So when you talk about permits and the things that you're supposed to have to do it, we've got to make sure that you're aware of all of those issues. We got to make sure that, look, you're right. I'm not a big proponent of anybody ever getting hurt, but the overreaction sometimes does occur, and we've got to find ways, and we can have that relationship, and we can have those conversations to allow those events to go on. But we're going to have conversations around security. We're going to have to do all of the things that we do at all of these other venues to make sure that you guys can go out and enjoy that music, and everybody can go home at the end of the night. That's the goal.
Right, but I've seen other events such as EDC and these other big events, and we know acts of violence happen in those events as well. Right. But the events that we throw on, they tend to get pushed to the forefront as being violent places. And there's a lot of places, a lot of people putting on good quality events, and they're getting shut down before they even get a chance to get started.
Right, and I guess what I would say to you, the difference between some of the events that I'm aware of and EDC as an example, there's 50 plus cops that are working at EDC every single day, and yes, you still do have acts of violence. So and it's all properly permitted, it's all fenced. People are being patted down for weapons and all of those kind of things. We can get there. I really believe we can get there, so you don't feel like the police are attacking you for your genre of music. I haven't seen it because of that. That's not what I ever saw while I was at Metro, but there's no doubt about it that that's how you feel about it. So I think it's a prime opportunity for us to have conversation and advance that, so that we can change the narrative about how it is that Metro responds to those events.
As your sheriff, I am a proponent for deregulation. I don't like all the regulations we have. I would love to see more venues open and less interaction from the government, basically. As a constitutional, that's what I support, allowing people and groups and venues to take place without the police involvement. I don't like all the rules and regulations that are required, but they're in place, like Kevin said, for safety reasons and safety codes and stuff like that. I just think sometimes we do get carried away with it, and I don't believe we should be picking one venue over another. So I would fully support your venue, as long as it wasn't violent, of course, and we'd have to be reactive in that situation. Police like to be proactive, so I think that's why all the rules and regulations, but in certain venues, we're gonna have to be reactive. Allow people to take place, that's what the Constitution says, peaceful demonstrations, peaceful assemblies. I was part of a church group about 2 years ago that assembled to pray for our nation, and we got shut down because we had music. Police came out and told us we couldn't do it. And to me, it was just wrong. I didn't like it. So as sheriff, we're not gonna be enforcing venue suppression. Let's put it that way.
Quickly, a comment. As part of the hiring process, we include panel interviews. As part of the panel interviews, we also include behavioral questions. which allowed us to uncover either toxic personalities or personalities that may not fit within a team environment. That can include a community as well. So my question is, as part of your hiring process, do you also do panel interviews? Do you also include questions that are behavioral questions that help uncover people's biases? Even though we all have them, we can all identify what those types of biases are and how they can be handled. And maybe that person may not fit in an organization like that. And we found that as well, that based on behavioral questions. So that's my question to both of you in your organization.
We do have oral interviews. We have scenario interviews. We have psychological testing. I think consists of like 800 questions.
Yeah, but I'm talking about interaction as a panel, that a behavioral question will be asked, and right there you would have to answer that. So people will tend to answer that question based on how they are exactly, and you can get back as to where that person's behavior is. So I'm not talking about 800 questions. It could be 4.
That was just one of many entry level testing questions. But I was talking about oral interviews as well. Is the oral interview fit into your category of what you're asking? It's 3, usually a supervisor and 2. It's a supervisor and 2 officers sitting in front of a candidate, asking them specifics.
Well, has anybody looked at those questions to ensure that it's a diverse question? And I don't want the questions that I know come from an IT standpoint, because that's in the private sector. But a question that a person would have to definitely answer: in my home life, this is what has happened, or I've been in a situation and this is how I handled it. That kind of question. It's an open-ended where they need to answer back, and will give you a better idea of how that person will react. Very open-ended that way. So if you get a direct answer, there's no trying to think later or come up with some, fixed answer, but it's right at that moment.
Well, our oral
That is the kind of panel interview I'm speaking of right then and there.
Our oral interviews are very similar to this right here, where you ask a direct question. We have 3 people that are specifically tasked with judging a particular candidate based on a set of questions that are asked of that candidate. And those questions have varied over time, but they're designed to make sure that we're getting candidates that think with common sense and without bias and without prejudice. And those are the purposes of the oral interview. And then I brought up that other thing, the 800 question psychological exam, which also tests their ability to reason and to find out if they have psychological issues. But those are the things we have in place now.
So Stan's right, we do have panel interviews, but I think the point you're trying to make is, are the questions really designed to uncover an individual's bias? We did move in that direction a couple of years ago. I don't believe we've gone far enough in that. One example that I can give you that pops up is that through a couple of officer-involved shootings, we noticed that there was a particular group of people that were pulling the trigger faster than others. They had grown up in war-torn Bosnia, Croatia, and they had been exposed to cumulative trauma for a very, very long time. So we added some additional questions into that process to determine whether or not somebody, as they were born and raised and exposed in an environment like that. We use PhDs to actually evaluate the questions that we're asking. We even went even further, but I want to just acknowledge we need to do more of that, because we need to work actively at rooting out bias and any of those people that are going to be hired as a police officer, because we know that it can negatively affect not only the police department itself, but the relationship with the community. The other piece, though, is that I can tell you that it was a year or 2 ago in the promotional process to become a police captain, we actually introduced into that process a community member from our MAC committee to sit in that room and ask the questions. Now, I will tell you, I took a lot of stuff from the people at Metro because we did that, but it was a resounding success. And it opened up a lot of eyes to a lot of the people, on both sides of it. And they got asked the very difficult questions that you would get asked if you were a captain standing in front of a particular audience. Okay.
Sir? Yes, good evening. My name is Mujahid Ramadan. I'm a part of Metro's Multicultural Advisory Council. And my brother was correct. He said, hey, we spent a substantial amount of time. I don't know if it was a year, it may have been 11 months, about 25 days or something. And it was one of the more challenging endeavors that we had engaged in. You know, we've been affected in terms of policies and changing policies, who's on the gang list, various things, that a lot of the questions came out here. We did a very poor job on that. I probably take more responsibility because I chaired it and it just didn't work out as the way I had intended to. But just to report to you, that initiative has been back in place now for about 7 months. Dora LeBron is chairing the committee. Pastor Kelsey also is involved because one of the focuses is going to be focusing on historical black colleges. Pastor Brown is going to also be involved, and that's going to help us out there. There's more money that's being invested in recruiting. I think Pastor Kelsey said you got $1 billion organization, but you have a mom and pop's budget in recruiting. Well, Dora has pushed that issue continually forward, and now there's more money in the budget, and it's been committed to a certain portion of them have to visit historical black colleges, because if you're going to go fishing, you want to go where the fish are at. If you want to go hunting, you go where the hunting is at. So we were able to show them in recruiting that you're going to have to recruit from places where we can get the quality at. And I hope that whoever's elected chair, so my question would be, initiatives like this recruiting African American, and it's a primary focus, folks. It's just one group that we're targeting now, to bring the African American numbers up to the equation that the department says they want the department to look like the community. So as well, a lot of good things are coming out of it, and I hope to report back to you we're doing better with that. My question to the both of you, these type of initiatives through the Multicultural Advisory Council and the different subcommittees, whether it's in recruiting or violence, homicide reduction, what would you do? Would you continue those type of initiatives that the department has been engaged in? Thank you.
So, some of the most rewarding parts of my career, Ramadan, was working with you on the Safe Village initiative and really changing the culture in Bolden Area Command before we started to change the culture in our police department. You know, I have always found that when you start at yes, whenever people have ideas, that your responsibility as a leader is to listen, to provide feedback, to foster it and grow it. And the best ideas I think that's ever happened at Metro didn't come from the person sitting in the sheriff's office or the undersheriff's office. It came from people that are out there doing the work, having interactions in the community, and they want to say, hey, can we do this? And sometimes we didn't do that as well as we needed to, but some of the most successful things that we've done in our police department ever originated in ideas that came from people on the street, demanding that we change the way it is that we approach things. And so the answer, it's a simple yes, but I wanted to just take a second and acknowledge the fact of the work that you have done and driven Metro forward. I'm still a little confused. How come I didn't know about that particular initiative? But we'll get it up and running. And what I have to say, I'm glad to hear that it is back up and running. You know, and the pushback that you'll consistently get in an organization like Metro is that, well, we can't have just a African American recruitment focus. Well, yeah, you can. You absolutely can. Because we're not really struggling with recruiting people that look like me as much. We are struggling with recruitment with people of color, and we've got to find ways from people that look like that to tell us what will appeal to the people so that they want to come in and make a difference in the communities they have the opportunity to serve. And thanks for making Metro better over all these years as well.
Well, I've sat in your class, and I have to say it was a welcoming endeavor, and I really appreciated it. As far as the initiatives you were talking about, yes, we're going to continue with them, and we're going to try and improve them. Like Kevin said, we're going to reach out to the community. The ideas don't just come from the sheriff; they come from who he surrounds himself with. And the sheriff, like myself, I will surround myself with people much smarter than me in those respects, and we will work on trying to make this diverse community similar to our police department.
if I could just add the fact that I attended the last graduation, and this is the friend out who graduated. So on a one-on-one, before we leave, maybe you want to just talk to me about that, because we attend all of the academy graduations, so we can measure what the numbers look like. And I agree.
Thank you. Okay, I'm in the audience right now. I'm helping up here, but I'm asking this question. So we're talking about recruitment. So we know that the black community is over-policed. There's a huge disparity of law enforcement's interaction with the black community. So using the population as a way to measure how many black officers we should have, no, you should be measuring how much interaction you're having in the community. So, because otherwise, you're saying 10%, 11%, 12% should be black, but then 80% of your policing is done in our community. So I strongly disagree with the notion that we should be looking at population numbers as a way to determine what policing should look like or what our recruits should look like. And I just wanted to make that comment. It's really not a question.
We're done. Well, I know, but I think it's an interesting point that you made, because that's what we have historically been asked over and over and over again, is that we want our community, our makeup of our police department to reflect the makeup of our community. That's what has been. So I'm open to having conversation around exactly what you're talking about. But at some given point or another, we have to just acknowledge that we need to get more people involved and from every single community. I think that means be quiet. Is that what you're telling me?
No,
Oh, you're holding it up. Right. So I acknowledge that I'm not saying that we only get to 10% or 11% or whatever the number is we gotta make it so people from all communities, people of all color, people of all religions, ethnicities, and background want to make law enforcement a career, because if they come in and they bring those diverse ideas and they have a responsibility back to their communities. I want to make one point. In 2010, I was in charge of the Bolden Area Command. And I went out in that community, and the number one criticism I heard every single time was, there's no black officers in Bolden Area Command. Heard it over and over and over again. I don't have there's contracts and there's processes where if you have seniority, you can bump out of an area command. We changed the culture so much, now there's a waiting list of people to get into Bolden Area Command. We went from having one black officer at that time to having more than I can count. They want to go to the black community because of the way that Metro has changed. We still have, I want to be clear, I acknowledge there is much work to be done, but those are facts. And so as you all continue to press us as an organization to get better, to demand change, to demand that we find ways to get better over and over again, that's what has driven Metro for many, many years.
Mr. Wright, did you have any comments you wanted to make?
Does she want me to respond to it or not? Because she's made it as a statement. As a quick response, basically, like Kevin said, we've always responded to numbers in the community as opposed to numbers in our police department. I just don't believe in pressuring people to do things just to make numbers. I believe in welcoming people into our police department. Those that want to be police officers, we want them. And we want to reach out to make the police department as diverse as our community. We just can't force that issue. But like you said, it's just not the numbers. It's interactions. The interactions do count, and they should be considered. So I agree with you on that.
Thank you. So I don't see anybody else lined up for the audience questions, so I'm going to take a moment of moderator's privilege, and I'm going to ask a question. This is just a simple yes or no question. It's about like a procedural thing that happens. Would you commit, and I'll start with you, Mr. Height, since Mr. McMahill started the last time. Would you commit to ending fees for body cam footage?
Commit to ending what?
Charging fees for body cam footage.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't believe in fees for anything that is public related, public needed. Absolutely no fees.
Ms. McMahill?
Yes, I'd like to find a way to make it so that Metro's not charging the types of dollars that we do. I have to expound just for a minute though for you to have a clear understanding of this. We had to, with the advent of body-worn cameras, we actually had to go in and create an entire unit to do body-worn camera polling, redaction, because there's only certain amount of things that when you go to just, it's not as simple as me turning over a CD to you and say, hey, here's your body worn camera, you go watch. There's confidential information in those kinds of things. You have to protect certain types of victims in those things. So I don't like the way that we do it now currently. There is some conversation around, well, if you're paying these police officers, then why do we need to be charging for the public records? I agree with that. I think that the numbers that I've seen that we charge are incorrect. And I would like to find us a way as well to move to the place that if we're going to be having a conversation about what is transparency, then we need to be able to provide that so you can see it.
Thank you. Since there's no more audience questions, we'll move back to the panelists since we still have some time. Lisa, sorry.
Gentlemen, what are your thoughts on the militarization of police departments, and how would you demilitarize the Metropolitan Police Department should either of you become the sheriff?
So that militarization of police departments has been around for a really long time, that conversation about what does that look like. If you would have asked this question right after 1 October, I think most people would have said, well, they need all of that equipment. They need that armor to go in there. They need the rifles to fight against those kind of things. And I believe that the police having that equipment is very necessary and very useful. We've saved a lot of people with that armor to go in when there's been people under fire. But I think the bigger question really has to be is, when is it used, right? That also goes into this area that we talk about with no-knock warrants. That is a huge issue in our country with the police today. We had a recent SWAT shooting where we hit the door, I think, 6 times, and that's not a no-knock warrant. That's because it may be issued as a no-knock warrant, but all of that type of equipment that you see, I believe, is necessary for police departments to have, but I don't believe that it's always necessary to be out on display and to be used. And it certainly goes sort of against the mentality of the community policing, because you shouldn't see that kind of stuff in your neighborhood unless something really bad has happened. And so I think we have to be more responsible about the use of that stuff. I think we have to have conversation around that no-knock warrant and the use of SWAT when you have those instances, because there's people losing lives on both sides of this argument, police and the people that they're trying to get. I think there's alternative ways to do it through surrounding call out and treating it like a barricade. There's a lot of opportunity for us to do that, and people don't have to die because of some of those issues.
Let me clarify something. Militarization of police departments is not just the presence of military vehicles, it's also the mentality.
That's what I was going to address.
I know our police departments hire and actively recruit members, former military members, something to like 30 to 40%. And so it's not just the outward facing equipment, guns, tanks, so it's the mentality that often is a problem also. And so how would you work with new officers coming in and how would you assess whether they have that mentality? And is that something that's desirable? Because I think many times that's part of the problem when you have these officers that are out on the street. They're looking at people and looking at regular, everyday citizens as a threat to them. And so how would you deal with it? And what would you do to change that mentality?
Yeah, see, the uniform to me is something that identifies a safety post. It's when you see a police officer in uniform, I don't want you to feel like, oh my gosh, it's us against them. We're afraid of that person. He's going to hurt me. He's going to cite me. He's going to take money away. I want the community to look at that police officer and say, oh man, that's a police officer. That's somebody that's going to protect me. That's somebody that's going to assure that I am safe right now. And that is the mentality that you were talking about. That's what I was going to bring up. It's not the uniform. The uniform is an identity of safety. The mentality is how approachable, how refreshing that personality can be. And that's what I was talking about earlier when I go to a restaurant and somebody comes up to my dinner table. I don't want to be that officer that's, look at, I'm eating, leave me alone. I want to be that officer that they're not afraid to come up to and say something to me and address a concern, because that's what being approachable is. And that's what we need to train our officers to be like. They need to be just what they are. our neighbors, our brothers, our sisters, our baseball coaches, our church leaders. They need to be recognized as people that we go to church with and see in our next door neighbor. That's the kind of mentality that I want our police to be. We are part of the community, not somebody separate because of a uniform. Okay.
So, quick question. I have two questions. The first one is, do you support a national police registry to ensure that police officers from other cities, municipalities that have issues back where they're from do not move here without us knowing what their background is?
I absolutely support that. We have that also goes into this issue of lateral police academies. So you have police that come from one agency to another and you shorten their training time. I think that's a mistake many times. What I have found sometimes in that lateral process is that when agencies find out that one particular officer is leaving, everything about that officer is glowing on their way out the door, and it's when they arrive, sometimes it's not really necessarily been the best candidate that you want to hire. From my perspective, I believe that when we fire an officer from our organization, that registry would prevent that officer from being hired in any other jurisdiction. It's an interesting concept to me because I think you have to get both city police chiefs and county sheriffs to agree to do something of that nature. And so I think it would have to be a legislative fix that requires all of those, because there's going to be a lot of police leaders in the country that will say absolutely not. So I think there's a big lift to get that done, but I see the value in it.
I have no objection to a registry. It's not something I would let's say favor or go after or purposely pursue, but I think it's up to the hiring agency to make sure that who they hire is qualified and competent, and that's through investigation, background, stuff like that. I happen to like the lateral transfer process because it saves the community money. It gets an experienced, mature officer rather than a brand new, say, a kid that's still living with his mom and dad that's 21. It's immature and may be very quick to pull his gun because he's scared. Some of these mature officers are very good, qualified individuals, and you can get them and train them towards Nevada policy, Nevada training, and Metro policies in a much shorter term than the 6 months required for a new officer. So it saves community money, and it fills our ranks because we're so depleted right now. It would be good, but nevertheless, a registry would be fine because we'd know something about them. But then if we don't have a registry on that, it's beholden on the police department to make sure that person fits our standards and isn't somebody that's, say, fired from another department because of cause.
Okay. My second question is racism and trust. We know that in the African American community, there's a high amount of distrust for the police department. If we polled the room right now, I'm sure at least half would say they don't trust Metropolitan Police Department. What will you do to build that trust on a daily basis when it comes to, obviously, talk about changing the culture? But we know that the distrust has only increased, which obviously also hurts your recruitment process and everything else that goes with, when it comes to, obviously, a typical stop or a ticket or just anything of that nature. Often there's resistance from us. We're nervous, we're in fear. What are you going to do if you do become the head person to be able to reduce that distrust and make us believe in the department again?
I think we've addressed it several times. It's a common question, and that is we need to hire the proper mature people. We need to hire the people without the bias, and then we need to train them properly, and we just need to be approachable people. We need to be people that can be related to. And other than that, it's a trial and error thing. If we get somebody that's treating people wrongly, we need to correct that immediately with proper supervision. But I think communication is like one of the biggest aspects of trust. When we pull people, I worked 30 years at Metro, and I pulled over a lot of people. And I can tell you, most of my shift was night shift. And I never knew who was in the car when I pulled them over, because at night you can't see in the car. I didn't pull them over because of race or sex or anything. I pulled them over because of the violation or whatever the behavior was at the time. And when I did, I communicated why I pulled them over. I didn't just tell them, give me your driver's license and registration. I mean, I tried to be friendly, I tried to be approachable, and the community bears some responsibility as well. They need to be cooperative to the point where they provide the materials when we ask them, and if they ask a question, the officer needs to be responsive to that question, not just dismissive. So I think communication is probably the most important. Communication and training and being approachable. That would be my answer.
One small follow-up is that, again, let's just say you say, hey, give us your, please, your registration.
Yes, sir.
We are afraid to reach over and grab something out of our wallets because we have to keep our hands visible.
That's up to the officer to communicate in a friendly manner that you don't need to be afraid. Just simply, sir, can I just have your registration? And he says it's in the glove box, fine. Go right ahead. Reach in the glove box. Of course the officer's got safety issues, as concerns, but he doesn't need to express that by pulling a gun or anything like that. He just simply needs to be watching a man's hands and being reactive. But I think it's simply communication and being mature in how you communicate with people.
I think the leadership at the head of Las Vegas Metro is critically important for us to address these types of issues head on. And I will tell you that if you think about this from this one simple perspective, when I went to the police academy in 1990, you had a class called the History of Policing. The history of policing started off with no, that's not what they taught. But that is what the history of policing is, right? So they talked about how in England they formed these patrols, and this is all, Sir Robert Peel, and here's the Pillian principles, and all of those kinds of things, and all of that is true. But what we didn't acknowledge was that the history of the policing in America actually started off with slave patrols, and we didn't acknowledge what happened when the police were used as weapons in demonstrations, and we were using dogs and fire hoses and all of the rest of the thing. And so acknowledgement of the harm at the highest level of our organization is one of the things. But number two really is that we've done a lot to start to change the narrative on this. And you cannot get tired of it because, by the way, you wake up every day and you have black skin, don't you? So how in the hell, as a leader, am I going to say I'm tired of talking about race issues in policing? You can't do that. You have to come in day and day out and fight to make your organization better than it ever was. And I acknowledge that. I understand that. But also, I can't understand your plight, your experience. There's no way, because, by the way, happy St. Patrick's Day from the red-faced blonde dude, right? The truth is that people in their positions, wherever they come from and however they grew up, have a uniquely different experience than what I did. But you don't know my experience either. So this goes back to the humanity of what I'm talking about, how it is that we can further develop that relationship, we can start to develop that trust, and we have to make sure we get that done.
Thank you. So for the final question, I'm going to take another moderator's privilege and ask. Sheriff Lombardo stated that Metro deported 10,000 people in a workaround to 287G, which is local cooperation with ICE. The ACLU of Nevada viewed that number as being odd, maybe even made up, and that no workaround existed. So does Metro have a workaround to 287G, and did Metro deport 10,000 people alongside that workaround? I'll start with you, Mr. McMahill, and then Mr. Hunt.
Thanks. I was there for 6 years as the number two. I'm not aware of a workaround at all for this issue on immigration. The policy that was in place for the 6 years that I was at Metro, I've been gone since over a year, was that ICE, well, it's a much longer story than I have time to tell, but we used to have ICE detainers. We would keep people beyond the actual charges, so ICE was going to come pick them up. We lost the court battle for that. Now it had to be a warrant. When an individual was going to be held, ICE would be notified. If ICE came and served that warrant, then they could do it. But it didn't matter under a Democratic president or a Republican president. At no time ever in that 6 years while I was there or even longer than that, did any administration pick up more than about 35% of the people that were notified on ICE detainers. The policy in place that was there when I was the undersheriff was that all felonies, domestic violence, and DUI and foreign-born individuals were those people that were run through ICE databases. We used to have 287G officers. We don't have that anymore, and I believe that the policy that we had originally was the right policy, but I'm certainly continuing to evolve in my thinking on this because of the narrative that you continually hear about these things. Immigration is not the responsibility of local law enforcement. I know a lot of people say, oh, yes, 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 because it's a hot topic position to take today, to be against all of these things. My police officers are already dealing with too much out there on the street, and I'm not adding immigration into their responsibility.
Thank you, Ms. White.
I've been retired through Lombardo's administration, so I'm not really sure exactly what he's been doing, but I've been hearing that the relationship with ICE has been broken off and that we're not doing deportations, we're actually letting them out the back door. To me, I feel that illegal immigration is a police issue, and I think it needs to be dealt with. We'd have to reestablish relationships with ICE and work with the legal advisor and work on exactly how we enforce it and but I don't believe in just letting it out the back door, especially with the issues that Kevin's brought up, domestic violence and other violent type crimes that we're dismissing.
Thank you. So now we'll move to closing remarks. When we started with the opening remarks, I started with Mr. McMahill and finished with Mr. Height. I feel since I gave you the first word, I'll give you the last word. So I'll start the closing remarks with you, Mr. McMahill, and then Mr. Height, you can close us out. So 2 minutes.
You want me to go first both times?
That's what we're doing.
Oh, okay. So first, I'd just like to say thank you all for coming. I'll be very candid with you. I would have hoped for a bigger audience here because I think this is such an important position. I think you electing a sheriff is more important than the governor, than other state offices, because the sheriff, if they don't do the right thing, if they don't lead this organization and stay in front of the change curve, if they're not keen to the challenges that police have with all communities, but particularly with communities of color, then we are going to fail. I retired over a year ago. I went into the private sector. I started working for a company. I was making a lot of money, doing all the great things, and then the sheriff said he didn't want to run for sheriff again. He was going to run for governor. I jumped right back into that fray because I led Metro. I don't think you need to ask candidates, what are they going to do? I think you also need to look at their past and their history and what have you done. Nobody stacks up against me when it comes to leading this organization. Nobody has had the opportunity to do the things that I have done. I've invested in you. I've invested in this community, and I'm going to continue to do that as your sheriff. And on June 14th, I would appreciate your vote so we continue to take Metro to the places that it needs to be taken to. Last thing I'd like to say is, Stan, I appreciate you showing up. Stan and I have been at every one of these either debates or forums. There's another candidate that was mentioned tonight that claims that he's on some trip for the legislative body. Well, I don't know how not running for the legislature could be any more important than showing up to a sheriff's forum hosted by the NAACP and the ACLU.
It's been a pleasure sitting here next to you answering these difficult questions, rather difficult questions. And thank you everyone as well for allowing me to participate and present my campaign to you along with Kevin. He's right, the sheriff is one of the most important positions that we can vote for this coming election. The sheriff does not answer to the governor, does not answer to the federal government. It's his responsibility to enforce or to protect the Constitution of America. And that Constitution serves we the people. And that's exactly what I plan to do. My leadership style is going to be hands-on and participative. I'm not going to be sitting up in an ivory tower just being some power-hungry sheriff. I'm going to be down in the briefings every day. And our officers have really never seen the sheriff. And I've been on this department since back in Ralph Lamb's days. So I've been on a long time. And I've never seen a sheriff in our briefings. I've never seen a sheriff come down to our parking lot and talk to the officers, actually go out on the road and mingle with them on their calls. That's what I plan to do. I plan to be a participative type sheriff. I plan on being in the briefings. I want to hear their concerns. I want to actually hear from the bottom up, not just necessarily from the top down. I want to hear from them. I want to be able to facilitate what they need and be there to provide for that. And so I'm hoping that you'll also back my campaign. My name is Stan Hite, H-Y-T, and my website is stanhiteforsheriff.com. Appreciate all your support, and thank you so much for being concerned citizens and taking the time to come out here tonight. Thank you.
Okay, so as we wrap up, I do want to take some time to recognize some of our elected officials who came out to witness and participate in our forum here. We have Senator Spearman over here by the board. Thank you for coming out. We have Assemblywomen Claire Thomas and Brittany Miller who joined us today. Thank you both for coming out. Then I also want to thank you all for coming out and participating with us today. I want to thank our panelists, Devin Moore, Lisa Mosley, Andrea Woods, and let you know that we are doing a series of these forums. So we did the North Las Vegas one a couple weeks ago. We're here for the sheriff today. In 2 more weeks, we have the Clark County District Attorney's Forum coming up on March the 31st at 6 p.m. That one's going to be live streamed, so there'll be a link and everything coming out on that. And the recordings from this event will be up on the ACLU's Facebook and YouTube channels, so you guys can go back and watch this or tell people who weren't here where to find it so they can watch it. And with that, we're all done. Thank you all for coming out.
Gentlemen, can I have the 2 candidates here to get a picture in front of the sign, please? Thank you. This right here.